You've got to be kidding me. That's my combat companion. The words slipped out of Sergeant Elias Vance before he could stop them, hanging in the sterile air of docking Bay 12 like a challenge no one dared answer. Around him, the bay shimmered with cold, artificial light, reflecting off polished metal and translucent alien alloys that seemed almost liquid beneath his boots. The massive observation windows stretched from floor to ceiling, revealing a fractured planet below, its surface scarred with glowing fissures, its orbit crowded with warships from a dozen different civilizations, all watching each other with quiet, calculated distrust. No one laughed. That was the first thing he noticed. A cluster of alien officers stood across from him, tall and composed, their luminous skin casting faint hues of blue and violet that pulsed with subtle emotional shifts. Their eyes, smooth, silver, and slightly too reflective, remained fixed on him in a way that wasn't just scrutiny. It was expectation, or maybe apprehension. And in front of them, barely reaching Vance's chest, stood the reason for his outburst. She looked like she'd taken a wrong turn on the way to somewhere safe. 4 feet tall at most, slender to the point of fragility, with elongated ears that curved slightly backward and a faint bioluminescent glow beneath her pale skin that flickered unevenly, like a failing light source. Her eyes were large, too large, and filled with something Vance recognized instantly. Fear, not the controlled kind soldiers learned to bury, not the hardened edge of someone who'd survived battle. This was raw, unfiltered. The kind that made your hands shake. "This is Lyra," one of the alien officers said, her voice smooth but carrying an undercurrent of tension. The faint glow of her skin shifted toward a muted lavender as she spoke, her gaze never leaving Vance. "She is your assigned combat companion." Vance blinked once, then twice, as if the situation might rearrange itself into something logical. "Right," he said slowly, scratching the back of his neck. "And I'm guessing there's a second Lyra somewhere, maybe taller, less terrified." There was a pause, a long one. Lyra flinched slightly at his tone, her glow dimming just a fraction. "No," the officer replied, that was it, no explanation. No correction, just no. Vance let out a quiet breath through his nose, glancing around the bay again, half expecting someone to step in and call it a test, a joke, anything. But the other soldiers, alien and human alike, were watching now, not openly but enough that he could feel it. Conversations had slowed, movements had stilled. Even the human crew kept their distance. That was the second thing he noticed. They weren't reacting to Lyra, they were reacting to him. "Okay," Vance muttered, shifting his weight and looking down at her again. "Hi, Lyra." She hesitated before responding, her voice soft and uneven. "Hello, Sergeant Vance." Her accent carried a musical quality, each syllable carefully formed, like she was afraid of getting it wrong. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, fingers interlocked so firmly the faint glow beneath her skin flickered brighter at the joints. He crouched slightly to bring himself closer to her eye level, lowering his voice. "You've done combat operations before." She shook her head immediately, too quickly, and no. "Training, a smaller shake, simulations." Silence. Her eyes dropped. Vance exhaled slowly, straightening up. "Great, fantastic, love that for us." One of the alien officers shifted, her luminous skin flickering with something sharper now, irritation maybe. "Sergeant, the assignment has been approved by the High Council. It is not subject to revision." "Yeah, I got that part," Vance replied, running a hand through his hair. "What I didn't get is why." Another pause, again no answer. Instead, the officer's gaze flicked briefly toward Lyra, then back to him as if the question itself had crossed a line. Vance caught it. And just like that, something in his posture changed. Subtle, but there, he stopped pushing. "All right," he said after a moment, his tone lighter now, almost casual. "No revisions, no explanations, love a mystery." A faint, uncertain glance passed between the alien officers. Lyra looked up at him, confused. Vance gave her a small, crooked smile. "Good news is I'm not dead yet, so statistically your chances just improved." She blinked once. Then unexpectedly the faintest hint of color returned to her glow, just a soft, flickering blue. It was almost like relief. Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet," he said, slinging his rifle more comfortably over his shoulder. "We haven't even gotten shot at." A few of the nearby human soldiers snorted quietly. One of the alien officers stiffened. Lyra looked alarmed again. Vance sighed. "Kidding, mostly." He turned slightly, glancing out toward the massive window where a fleet of sleek, needle-like alien warships drifted in silent formation around a central vessel that dwarfed them all. a radiant structure of impossible geometry, its surface shifting like liquid crystal. "Let me guess," he added, nodding toward it. "That's where all the important people sit around deciding to send civilians into war zones." "That," the officer said carefully, "is a diplomatic command vessel belonging to the royal lineage of the Ithari Dominion." "Ah," Vance said, "royalty even better." He looked back down at Lyra. "You royalty too?" Her reaction was immediate. "No," she said, a little too quickly, her glow flickering erratically again. I am not." She stopped herself, swallowing hard. Vance raised an eyebrow. "Relax," he said gently. "I'm not big on formalities anyway." But he filed it away, because that was the third thing he noticed. Everyone else in the bay had been watching him, but when Lyra spoke, they watched her. The first shot came before Lyra even realized they were under attack. It screamed past Vance's shoulder in a streak of white-hot plasma and shattered against the corridor wall behind them, spraying molten fragments across the dim, fractured interior of the orbital station. The impact lit the hallway in a violent flash, revealing jagged metal ribs, exposed wiring, and the skeletal remains of a structure that had once been something far more elegant. Lyra froze, completely. "Move." Vance snapped, already grabbing her by the arm and pulling her down behind a collapsed bulkhead as a second volley tore through the corridor. Her breath hitched sharply, her glow flickering erratically, almost strobing with panic. I can't." "Yeah, you can," he said, not unkindly but with no room for argument. "Rule 1, don't stand where people are shooting." Another blast shook the corridor, closer this time. Vance leaned out just enough to get a glimpse. 3 figures advancing, tall, armored, their silhouettes sharp and angular with elongated helmets that tapered back like blades. Their movements were precise, synchronized, not militia. Not random scavengers. "Great," Vance muttered, "professional psychos." Lyra's voice trembled. They are not supposed to be here. This sector is under coalition." "Yeah, well, they didn't get the memo." He ducked back as another shot carved a glowing line through the bulkhead above them. Lyra's hands were shaking so badly now that the faint light beneath her skin had dimmed almost to nothing. She pressed herself tighter against the metal as if she could disappear into it. Vance noticed. He always noticed. "Hey," he said, lowering his voice slightly despite the chaos. "Look at me." She didn't, Lyra. Slowly, hesitantly, her eyes lifted. "Good," he said. "Now listen, you don't need to be fearless, you just need to move when I tell you. That's it. You do that, we're good." Another explosion rattled the corridor. She swallowed hard. "Okay." "Okay," he echoed, nodding once. "That's all I need." He took a breath, then leaned out again, firing 2 controlled bursts down the corridor. The return fire intensified immediately, forcing him back. "Yeah, they're definitely interested in us," he said. "Which is rude, honestly." Lyra blinked, confused. "Don't worry about it," he added quickly. "We're leaving." He glanced down the side passage branching off to their left. A narrow service corridor, half collapsed but passable. "On 3, he said. "We run, stay close, no stopping." She nodded barely. 1, 2. A sudden sharp distortion rippled through the air. Not sound, not light, something else. For a split second, everything felt wrong. The hum of the station faltered. The flickering lights stuttered. Even the distant vibrations of combat seemed to skip like a broken signal. Lyra gasped. The glow beneath her skin surged, bright, sudden, uncontrolled. Vance turned, eyes narrowing. What was? The blast door at the end of the side corridor slammed open. Not partially, not mechanically. It just opened, clean, instant, silent. Both of them stared at it. "I didn't," Lyra whispered, her voice small and shaken. "I didn't touch anything." "Yeah," Vance said slowly. "I noticed." Another volley slammed into their cover, snapping him back into motion. "Cool mystery for later," he added. "We're moving now." He grabbed her hand this time, not her arm, and pulled her into the side corridor. She stumbled at first, then caught herself, forcing her legs to keep up as they sprinted through the narrow passage. Behind them, heavy footsteps followed, fast, too fast. "They're coming," Lyra said, panic rising again. "Yeah, that's what footsteps usually mean," Vance replied, glancing back briefly. "You're doing great, by the way." "I'm not." "You are," he cut in. "You're still moving, that's the job." Her breathing was uneven, but she didn't stop. They reached another junction, this one sealed. Vance swore under his breath, already reaching for the manual override panel. Come on, come on." The panel flickered, dead. "Of course it is," he muttered. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder. Lyra stared at the door, her glow beginning to pulse again, not as chaotic this time, but sharper, more focused. I think I can. Lyra, Vance said, not looking at her, still trying to force the panel to respond. Now's not the time to try something you're not sure about. I know, she said, her voice trembling, but there was something else in it now, determination. I just feel it. He hesitated just for a fraction of a second, then he stepped back. All right, he said, show me. Lyra raised her hand slowly toward the sealed door, her fingers hovering just above the surface. The faint light beneath her skin intensified, spreading in delicate, branching patterns along her arm. For a moment. Nothing. Then the metal shuddered. A low, resonant hum filled the corridor, deep and ancient, as if something buried within the station itself had just woken up. The door slid open. Smooth, effortless. Not like a damaged system struggling to comply, but like something recognizing her. Vance stared. Okay, he said quietly, that's new. Lyra looked just as shocked as he did. I don't understand. Yeah, he said, pulling her through the doorway as the sound of approaching enemies echoed behind them. Starting to think that's a theme. They moved deeper into the station, the corridor ahead widening into something far older. Walls no longer jagged and broken, but smooth, seamless, etched with faint, glowing patterns that pulsed softly in response to Lyra's presence. The air felt different here, heavier. Watching, Lyra slowed, her fear momentarily replaced by confusion and something like recognition. I've never been here, she whispered. Vance said, scanning their surroundings. And yet the place is opening doors for you like you own it. Her glow softened, stabilizing. I don't know why. A distant voice crackled over Vance's comm unit. Distorted, urgent, and very much not human. Confirmed sighting. The key is active. Repeat, the key is active. Vance froze mid-step. Did you hear that? He asked. Lyra nodded slowly, her expression paling. Another voice followed, sharper this time. All units converge. Priority capture, do not terminate. Silence settled between them for half a second. Then Vance exhaled long and low. All right, he said. I officially don't like that. Lyra's voice was barely audible. They're talking about me, aren't they? Vance looked down at her, really looked this time. At the way the walls responded to her, at the way the systems obeyed her, at the way an entire enemy force had just changed its objective because of her. And then slowly he gave a small, humorless smile. Yeah, he said, pretty sure you're not just here for moral support. The station woke up the moment Lyra decided to stop running. It wasn't a gradual thing. It was immediate. The soft patterns along the walls surged into brilliant life. Lines of ancient light racing outward in every direction like veins, filling with energy after centuries of silence. The air itself seemed to vibrate, low and resonant, as if something vast had just taken a breath for the first time in ages. Vance felt it through the floor, through his chest, through the uneasy stillness that followed. Lyra, he said carefully, lowering his weapon just a fraction, tell me that was you. She stood a few steps ahead of him, small and still, her back straight in a way he hadn't seen before. The trembling was gone. The erratic flicker of her glow had stabilized into something steady, bright, controlled, almost elegant. I didn't mean to, she whispered, but it's listening. Behind them, the corridor they'd come through erupted with movement. Enemy units poured in, sleek armor, glowing weapons raised, their formation tight and disciplined. But they didn't fire. They hesitated, for the first time. Their helmets tilted, their posture shifting as the environment around them pulsed with unfamiliar energy. One of them spoke, voice distorted through a translator field. The signal, it has fully awakened. Another responded, sharper, almost reverent. Confirm visual, the key has bonded. Vance stepped forward, placing himself slightly between Lyra and the advancing soldiers out of pure instinct. Yeah, he muttered under his breath. Bonded, that sounds safe. Lyra didn't move behind him this time. Instead, she stepped up beside him, not hiding, standing. I can feel it, she said softly, her gaze fixed on the glowing architecture around them. It's not a weapon. That's good, Vance replied, because there are a lot of weapons pointing at us right now. One of the enemy soldiers took a step forward, lowering his rifle, not in surrender, but in something closer to caution. You do not understand what you carry, he said, his tone controlled but strained. That system predates your species, it predates ours, it was built to govern. To control, another interrupted. To balance, the first corrected sharply. Lyra shook her head slightly, her luminous eyes narrowing as if she were listening to something deeper than their voices. No, she said, It was built to respond. The walls brightened in agreement. Vance glanced sideways at her. I'm just going to trust you know what you're talking about. Her lips parted slightly as if she might smile, but the moment passed quickly. They want to use it, she added quietly. All of them, my people, theirs, everyone. Yeah, Vance said. That tracks. The lead soldier took another step closer, more urgency creeping into his posture now. You must come with us. The Dominion will protect you. You will be guided. I don't want to be guided, Lyra said. Her voice didn't shake, not even a little. The glow around her intensified, spreading outward into the floor beneath her feet. The ancient patterns responded instantly, shifting, aligning, forming something far more complex than before. The soldiers stiffened. One of them raised his weapon again, uncertain this time. Vance noticed. He slowly lifted his own rifle, not aiming yet, but ready. Easy, he said under his breath. Let's not ruin the moment. Lyra took another small step forward. For someone so small, it was a massive thing. I was afraid, she said, her voice echoing slightly now as the station itself seemed to carry her words. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I stayed small, I wouldn't matter. Her light flared brighter, but I do. The floor beneath the enemy soldiers shifted, not violently, precisely. Panels of ancient material rose between them and Lyra, forming a barrier, not jagged or aggressive, but absolute. Their weapons powered down mid-charge, systems flickering out as if gently overridden by something far older and far more certain. A stunned silence filled the corridor. Even Vance didn't speak. Lyra turned her head slightly, looking back at him. There was still fear in her eyes, but it was different now. It wasn't controlling her anymore. You stayed, she said softly. Vance blinked once, caught off guard by the simplicity of it. Yeah, he replied, kind of the job. No, she said, shaking her head. You didn't have to. He let out a small breath, glancing briefly at the immobilized soldiers, then back at her. Yeah, he said again, quieter this time. I did. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Lyra turned back to the glowing expanse around them, lifting her hand once more. The station responded instantly, the light shifting, condensing into something vast and unseen beyond the walls, systems awakening, defenses recalibrating, control transferring. Far above them in orbit, the massive fleets circling the broken planet began to falter as their weapon systems flickered, then powered down entirely. Across command decks filled with alien royalty, admirals, and diplomats, silence spread like a shockwave. Because, for the first time, no one was in control, except her. Back in the corridor, the barrier dissolved slowly, but the enemy soldiers didn't advance again. They stood there, watching, not with aggression now, but with something far more uncertain. Respect or fear. Lyra lowered her hand, the light around her softening but never fading completely. It won't belong to anyone, she said. Not anymore. One of the soldiers spoke, almost reluctantly. Then, what will you do with it? She hesitated just for a second, then she glanced at Vance. He raised an eyebrow, no pressure. A faint, real smile touched her expression. I'll protect it, she said, like he protected me. Vance huffed quietly. That's a big promotion. It's the same thing, she replied. He didn't argue because somehow. It was. The station settled into a steady, living hum around them, no longer dormant, no longer waiting. And in that quiet aftermath, surrounded by soldiers who no longer knew whether to fight or kneel, a terrified girl who was never meant for war stood unshaken beside a human who was never meant to matter. And somehow, that was exactly why everything had changed.